Hey, what's up everybody? It's Hans. I know it's been a while, but you know, excuses, life. You know how it is. But anyway, here I am. So the last article that I wrote on f-stoppers had to do with medium format and the medium format look. And you know, some people loved it, some people hate it, nothing I didn't expect, but you know, it was fun to write. But anyway, someone from Hasselblad saw the article and saw the part where I remarked that there was such a thing as a full-frame digital camera, but I really don't have the resources or the need to test out such a thing. And they wrote to me and said, well, would you like to try one? So Dan at Hasselblad took it upon himself to send me a H6D 100C digital camera. So I had that for about 3 weeks or so, and I got to put it through its paces, and I wasn't sure really what kind of video to make. The last thing that I want to do is make a review. This is not a review of that camera because I didn't have it long enough. It's just not my thing as far as, you know, doing technical reviews, but I wanted to give more of a sense of what was it like to shoot with something like this. So, okay, so first things first, what is this camera? Hey, what's up everybody? So I realized in doing this review that I kind of forgot to, you know, do any kind of footage with me holding the camera. So it doesn't look like I actually had the camera really, but I wanted to, before I returned it, say here, I've got the camera. This is it right here. It is the Hasselblad H6D 100C, and it has a 100mm f2.2 lens. It's an awesome camera. Thanks Dan from Hasselblad for sending it over to me. I really appreciate it. So the rest of the review will be, well, not even a review. It's not a review. This is not a review. I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what it was like to shoot with something like this. So the rest of this video will just be me talking about it, talking about the image quality, how it stacks up, and just my general thoughts on what it's like to shoot with a $30,000 camera. All right, check it out. So this camera is a full frame medium format digital camera. Now what that means is that the sensor size on it is the equivalent or close to a 6 by 4.5 centimeter film frame. So what this means is that this camera and cameras like it are as close to medium format, true film medium format as you can get currently. And I thought it would be really cool to kind of just, you know, play with this camera really, and just see what I thought about the experience of shooting with something like this. Now, who is this camera for? First and foremost, you got to be making a lot of money because this camera, just the body, costs almost $30,000. I mean, you can always rent one. Absolutely, you can always rent one. The lenses are very expensive as well. I think the lens that I had on it runs about $5 almost as well. But really, this is for commercial photographers or editorial photographers who have large budgets, who have clients that are, or who have clients that need to be impressed by such equipment. And that sounds superficial, but hear me out here. Like when you're dealing with commercial clients at a caliber that some of these people are who own this camera, they expect to see a certain type of camera when they walk onto a set. And if you have a almost equally capable little Sony body or Canon body or whatever body, some people may be put off by that. They could be thinking, well, you know what, I could do this myself, or I could pay someone a lot less to do this job. So a lot of it has to do with what does the camera look like? And this camera is huge and it's very impressive looking. And it's a very impressive camera. So second of all, people who shoot tethered. This camera is large, it's unwieldy, and it's really easy to miss a shot, even when you think that you got it. So being tethered, you can kind of go back and look at your shots immediately and say, oh, I need to shoot that again, especially when you're dealing with fairly wide open apertures, because it's really, really easy to miss your depth of field when you're dealing with this much usable focus space. Being tethered, very, very useful when dealing with this kind of camera. This camera is not for people who rely on autofocus. This camera has one, count it, one autofocus point, and it's very easy to misfocus. I mean, yes, that autofocus, when it hits, it hits. And this camera even has something called true focus, where it'll actually, like, once you lock onto a center point, it will record, the little accelerometers in the camera will record the movement of your hand to try and focus recompose, and it'll track that to maintain focus. And it actually works really well with medium distances, but it's not something that you could go out into the field and just be willy-nilly spraying and praying. You just can't do that. Resolution. I don't know that anyone needs 100 megapixels anymore, ever. I don't know that they ever did need 100 megapixels, but it really is very impressive to look at those files on your computer and to be able to zoom in all close, and it's just like, there is a certain wow factor, and I can totally admit that. Is that wow factor more than, say, an A7R IV? I don't know. I mean, that's pretty close. The difference between 60 and 100 megapixels in real world is pretty negligible, really. So resolution, it's great, but outside of demanding a very, very powerful computer or a fast hard drives or both to be able to work in an efficient manner, you don't need 100 megapixels, but it is really cool to have. And cropping, if you find yourself needing to, like, take a picture of a whole scene and then crop in wherever you want and get usable files, like, I mean, you can do a full body and then crop in for a headshot and it's going to look perfect. So that's great. I mean, if you find yourself cropping a lot, there's no judgment there on my part. You find yourself cropping, you may love it. You may absolutely love that kind of resolution. One of the things that I found myself really surprised about with this camera was the skin tones that are recorded with this camera. And I don't know, it's really hard to say, like, wow, this camera produces very good skin tones, because, we're dealing in the age of RAW, and with a RAW converter, you should be able to just, pop it into RAW, no matter the camera, do some little magic, whiz-bang magic, and there you got great skin tones. But straight out of the camera, putting this, I mean, like, there was no contest in what I was seeing between skin tones from this camera, and I had a Fuji X-T3 that I was also shooting alongside with it on some of the shoots. And caveat, I know crop sensor versus full frame medium format digital, I know there's no contest, but at certain sizes, at certain print sizes, there shouldn't be much difference. When you start blowing up as far as your print size goes, yeah, you're going to see the difference. But anyway, I'm talking about skin tones. Skin tones on this camera are stupid. They're so good, especially people of color. There's a richness in the skin that I have not seen in any other camera. So if you are shooting mostly people, I don't know of a better camera or camera body or system. I haven't tried the phase ones that are also like this. I don't know, but I mean, there's something about these files that they're natural, they're rich, the skin looks fantastic. So if you're shooting people, I can totally recommend this camera for that. The viewfinder is so fun to look into. I mean, I don't know how useful that is, but it's just a really pleasant experience to look into the viewfinder, because it's massive, it's huge. It's just like the old film cameras. So if you haven't had the treat of looking into an optical viewfinder from a true medium format system, whether that be film or this camera, you don't know what you're missing. Go out. Like, even if you just go to your local camera store and go and look into some medium format cameras, and you're going to have an idea of what it's like to look into this camera as well. The speed of the camera. Now, using this camera, it's such a cliche to say, using a big camera like this, it slows you down and makes you compose better. But it really does, because you just can't shoot fast with this camera, especially with the one autofocus point. Like, you have to really focus, recompose, think about what you're shooting, because, like, each of these files is 200 plus megabytes. Each file as a RAW, like if you're shooting at 16-bit, which why wouldn't you be? Each file is over 200 megabytes. That's a lot. You're going to fly through hard drive space if you're just spraying and praying. You need to think about what you're shooting. So it really does slow you down, whether that's something that you could totally do, if you had a smaller sensor camera, of course you could shoot slower. Why not? It requires a little bit of discipline, but you could do it. But this camera actually requires you to. Cons. So the camera is not fast to shoot. So, I mean, if your style of shooting is, go, 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 try and capture the moment, the candid moments, this isn't the camera for you. Something like this is not, it's not what you need. It's not what you need in your line of work. File size. I already talked about file size, but once you're shooting in there, when your computer, I have a decently fast computer. It was probably top of the line, like 4-5 years ago, maybe less. But I have SSDs in there, and your computer will feel it. When you import these files, your hard drive space is going to go quickly, and your computer is not going to like you very much. But if you have a top-of-the-line system or close to, or just a decently running system, and you've got the storage for it, and fast storage, like don't be going in there with your 5400 RPM hard drive trying to do, you're going to be getting coffee between every single file. Like, don't do it. Just get an SSD, and trust me, SSDs are pretty cheap these days. You can get a 250 gigabyte one for probably $75. So just go for it. Do it. Depth of field. Now, I know depth of field is what people love, or that shallow depth of field. They love that. That's great. When you're dealing with a camera like this that has one autofocus point, shallow depth of field is your enemy, because you are going to miss so often that it's going to drive you bonkers. Okay, you're gonna miss focus a lot. So shooting wide open on a camera like this, although it sounds great, it sounds like, I'm gonna get that dreamy bokeh, you're gonna be frustrated, okay? That this is not the camera for that. And the viewfinder, it's big, but it's not made for manual focus like the old cameras were, like the old medium format cameras, they were made to manual focus. This one is not, even though it only has one autofocus point, it's not made to, it's not made for critical focus. Let's put it that way. Lens issues. Now, I don't know if it was just the lens that I had, but this camera, it had some issues as far as when you got up on especially white surfaces. I noticed there was some blooming, and I'm not a pixel peeper, it's not that big a deal to me. But when you have a $30,000 camera, you don't expect to see smearing in the whites. You don't expect to see that on $30,000. And I was really surprised, Briefly, I had in my possession an A7R IV, and I took a couple of shots of my friend Nito with both cameras, with the Hasselblad and with the A7R IV. And that A7R IV, I was shooting with an 85 millimeter 1.4 G Master, and it was no contest. The Sony images were technically better. It surprised me. It is not what I expected at all. But sharpness, it was better, and there was no blooming in the whites. There was no aberration. No purple fringing. Nothing. The Sony lens was better. So, conclusion, would I buy this camera? Yeah. If I needed it, if I were a high-end commercial photographer who needed to impress clients, and I was shooting mostly people or things or product in a very controlled environment where I could be tethered, yes. Absolutely. The image quality is fantastic, especially when dealing with skin tones. It's a very impressive body, even if it's unwieldy. But that said, I live in the real world and I can't afford something like this. I would not have, gear acquisition syndrome about a camera like this, thinking that your camera can't do this, because I mean, technology being what it is, I mean, literally the only thing that I missed from shooting with the Sony as compared to the Hasselblad was the skin. The skin tones were phenomenal. And I know I sound like a broken record saying that, but I mean, just people just look amazing on it. So anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into just the overall feeling of what it was like to shoot something like this. Yeah, like I said, not a review, but thanks Dan from Hasselblad for sending it over. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience of it. It's not something that I would do normally, but it was a treat. It was an absolute treat to shoot on that camera, and I would highly recommend anyone who has the means or the need, who can work it into their budget and is shooting people. You're not going to have a better experience. Anyway, if y'all have any questions or comments about it, just sound off below, and we'll see you next time.